Right now, as you're watching this, the United States is sitting at the highest wildfire alert level that exists, level 5, the maximum. Every local and regional resource is already tapped out. So we're talking national mobilization, military aircraft, crews flown in from other countries. Meanwhile, in Western Ontario, a single fire has already burned through roughly 320,000 hectares. That's close to 790,000 acres, an area bigger than some small countries. Chicago's air quality hit 481 last week. Anything past 300 is labeled hazardous, in uppercase. And somewhere in the Minnesota wilderness, two brothers spent a night boxed in by flame on three sides, with nowhere left to paddle but east. By the end of this, you'll know exactly what's driving all of it, why it's spreading faster than crews can put it out, and yeah, the one signal that tells scientists it's about to get worse. No guessing, no dramatizing. Just the mechanism, the numbers, and what actually happens next. This isn't one fire or one city with bad air. It's one weather system stretched across an entire continent. Before we go any further, I want to hear from you directly. Where are you watching from, and has this wildfire season affected you yet? Is the smoke reaching your city, your state, or are you watching this from somewhere completely untouched? Tell me your location in the comments, because one of the most surprising parts of this event is how far these fires are affecting people who are hundreds or even thousands of miles away from the flames. And if you want to understand what these fires are actually doing, not just the headlines, but the science behind the heat, the smoke, and the warning signals firefighters are watching next, subscribe. We are tracking these events as they develop and breaking down what the numbers actually mean. And if this video helps you understand what is happening across North America right now, tap the like button. It helps this information reach people who are waking up to orange skies, dangerous air quality, and a fire season that is changing faster than many expected. The same heat sitting over the Intermountain West and Canada's boreal forest is the reason smoke is now choking the Great Lakes, the Midwest, and the Northeast too. The National Interagency Fire Center, the agency that tracks this for the whole country, has the number. Over 40,000 fires already this year, burning close to 4 million acres. That's about 1.6 million hectares. Up in Canada, the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Center puts their own count at nearly 1.9 million hectares, almost 4.7 million acres. Okay, so this is the actual explanation for all of it. The sky itself has gotten thirstier, not figuratively, physically. Warmer air can hold more moisture, so it pulls harder on anything wet beneath it. The soil, the grass, the trees. Scientists have a name for that pull. We'll get into it in a second because that pull is basically running this whole show. And hang on, there's something else worth holding on to. Right now, some of the smoke sitting over these fires is actually acting like a shade, cooling the ground underneath it a little. That sounds like good news. It isn't. We'll come back to exactly why. This is the mechanism running underneath almost everything else in this story. Scientists call it vapor pressure deficit. Forget the name for a second. Think of it as the atmosphere's thirst. Warmer air can physically hold more water than cooler air. So when the air heats up, it starts demanding moisture from whatever's nearby. The soil, the grass, the trees. Picture a vacuum cleaner running over a damp sponge on your kitchen counter. It doesn't just dry the surface. It pulls water out from deep inside the fibers until that sponge is brittle enough to crumble in your hand. That's happening across millions of acres of forest right now. And yeah, it's measurable. One reading scientists use is called the Fine Fuel Moisture Code. In the Pacific Northwest this month, it hit close to 95 out of 100. Translate that. It means almost any spark, a dropped cigarette, a chain hitting pavement, a car crash, turns into a fire almost instantly. 95 out of 100. Sit with that for a second. And this is where I want to hear from you. Before today, had you ever heard of vapor pressure deficit, or the atmosphere's ability to pull moisture out of the landscape? Let me know in the comments, because this invisible measurement is becoming one of the most important numbers behind modern wildfire behavior. That single number is why a vehicle hitting a power pole in southern Oregon on July 10th turned into a fire covering over 1,000 acres, about 405 hectares, in under 3 hours. So why won't this heat just move on the way weather usually does? Turns out it's stuck on purpose. Not by anyone, by physics. Picture a mountain of warm air parked over the middle of the country, and it's not going anywhere. Meteorologists call it an omega block, named for the shape it makes on a pressure map. Underneath it, air sinks instead of rising, which compresses it, which heats it up even more. And the sky stays clear the whole time because sinking air burns off clouds. Think of it like a heavy glass lid dropped over a pot that's already simmering. Nothing escapes. The heat just keeps stacking on top of itself. That lid is the reason this isn't a one-day spike. It's the reason the vacuum never clocks out. So why does dry fuel actually catch and spread this violently? This next part is a little counterintuitive. Wood doesn't really burn on its own, believe it or not. It has to break down first into gas through a process called pyrolysis, and that only happens under intense heat. Let's break it into 3 quick steps. First, the heat arrives. Second, it forces the wood to release flammable gas. Third, that gas ignites, and the flame it makes throws off enough radiant heat to start the same process in the next tree before the fire has even reached it. Picture a row of matches standing upright, close together. Light the first one, and the heat alone, not the flame touching it, sets off the next match. Then the next. That's functionally what's happening across whole hillsides right now. Firefighters track something called the energy release component, and when it crosses into the highest range they measure, crews get pulled back from direct attack completely. The radiant heat alone is considered too dangerous to stand near. And once a fire gets big enough, it stops behaving like a fire and starts behaving like weather. Normally smoke drifts up and spreads out, kind of like steam off a kettle. But a fire burning hot enough builds its own storm cloud, called a pyrocumulonimbus, and that's a different animal completely. Picture that same kettle steam, except now it's riding a fast-moving escalator straight up into the upper atmosphere. Satellites like Suomi NPP track a reading called the UV aerosol index, and once it climbs past 10, that's the signal smoke has punched into the stratosphere. Get this, these fire-generated storms throw their own lightning. Thousands of strikes, igniting new spot fires miles ahead of the main blaze. That's exactly what happened on July 6th, when dry lightning hit northern Minnesota and lit over a dozen new fires inside the Boundary Waters wilderness. The same stretch of forest two brothers would soon be trapped in. Look, all of that smoke has to go somewhere, and it travels a long way. The particles involved, called PM25, are small enough to slip past your body's natural filters entirely and move straight into your bloodstream. Chicago hit an air quality index of 481 this month. Detroit hit 446. Spokane hit 406. All 3 landed in the hazardous category, the worst rating that exists. Hospitals in Toronto, New York, and Chicago all reported an 80% jump in emergency visits for asthma and heart complications tied directly to the smoke. That's the vacuum's exhaust, riding the same winds that fed it, landing on people who live hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles from the nearest flame. This isn't the first time this exact chain has played out, and the last time it happened, it broke records. Come to find out, the last time it happened was 2023. Canada's wildfire season that year burned somewhere between 16.5 and 18 million hectares. That's over 40 million acres. 232,000 people had to evacuate. The country spent 120 straight days at the same maximum alert level the U.S. is sitting at right now, and needed help from 14 different countries just to keep crews in the field. A 2025 health study estimated the smoke from that single season was linked to roughly 70,400 premature deaths worldwide. Read that back. 70,000. From smoke, not flame. And yeah, this next part should worry you more than the last one did. This year is moving faster than that record-breaking year did. Canada didn't hit its top alert level until mid-August in 2023. The U.S. hit its own top level by July 20th this year, weeks earlier in the season, and the fires are burning closer to the border this time. Ontario, Minnesota, instead of way up in Quebec and the Northwest Territories. This isn't the only precedent either. In 2020, fires across the western U.S. burned over 10 million acres, roughly 4 million hectares, and caused close to $20 billion in damage, which lands closer to $25 billion once you adjust for today's dollars. Go back further to 1950, and a single fire called Chinchaga burned 1.4 million hectares in northern Canada and sent smoke thick enough to dim the sun over parts of Europe. The vacuum was running back then too, just slower than it's running today. Look, it's worth being straight about scale here, because this is exactly where online claims start running away from the actual science. You'll see numbers floating around claiming the area burned by wildfires could jump 16 to 66 times higher by the end of the century. That figure comes from one specific kind of model, one that leans entirely on how thirsty the air gets. The vacuum, basically, taken to its most extreme mathematical conclusion. But a competing group of researchers, publishing in a journal called AGU Advances, argue soil moisture is actually the better predictor. Under their model, the increase looks a lot more moderate, 2 to 3 times, not 66. That's a real ongoing argument between real scientists. Fair enough, not a settled number, and I'm not going to pretend it's settled just because the bigger figure is scarier. But don't mistake that disagreement for reassurance either. You don't need the maximalist number to be true for this to already be serious. Level 5. A fuel moisture code sitting at 95. An air quality index over 480. Those aren't projections. Those are today. Whenever something like this spreads across the news, a predictable wave of theories follows right behind it. And straight up, a couple deserve a direct answer. The first claims these fires are being deliberately started with directed energy weapons, laser beams fired from satellites or aircraft, and that objects painted blue somehow deflect them. Physically, this falls apart fast. No aircraft on Earth carries a power source large enough to ignite forest at that scale from the sky. And real high-energy lasers produce a beam you can't see at all, not the visible green or blue lines circulating in these videos. As for the melted cars sitting next to untouched green trees, that's just normal fire physics. Wind-driven embers get into a car's vents and ignite the plastic and fuel inside, while plenty of tree species hold enough internal moisture and thick bark to resist the same flames. The second claim says this is intentional state-driven arson, meant to clear land for wind farms or push people into so-called 15-minute cities. Real talk, think about the logistics of that for a second. A megafire destroys the roads, the power lines, and the topsoil any construction project would actually need. It doesn't clear land for development, it makes the land useless for years. Not exactly a great business plan. And the version of this claim that swaps in eco-activists instead of elites runs into the same wall. A match can't sustain a continent-wide fire without the heat and dryness already doing the real work. The thing underneath both of these claims is real, even if the claims themselves aren't. People are watching their air turn orange and their towns get evacuated, and they want an explanation with a face attached to it. The real explanation doesn't have a villain. It has a heat dome, a vacuum pulling water out of the ground, and a century of decisions about how we've managed our forests. So what actually tells scientists whether this gets worse or starts to ease off? Truth is, it comes down to a handful of concrete signals. Watch for the national alert level to drop from 5 back down to 4. That happens once fewer than 80% of the country's top firefighting teams are still tied up. Watch the energy release component to see if it falls back below that dangerous 90th percentile mark. Watch the air quality numbers in Chicago, Detroit, and Spokane to see if they're climbing or finally coming down. Watch the UV aerosol index to see whether fires are still punching smoke into the stratosphere. And remember that smoke lid we mentioned earlier, the one quietly shading and cooling the ground underneath it. Forecasters expect that lid to break eventually. And when it does, fresh oxygen and direct sunlight hit fuel that's had weeks to dry out even further. That's usually when a fire's growth accelerates hard, not when it calms down. Point is, none of this means the entire country goes up in flames at once. It means these are the specific gauges the people fighting this are watching, right now, hour by hour. Let's slow down for a second, because an alert level and an air quality number don't mean much until you see what they actually do to one person standing inside them. Tom and John Connolly are brothers. Tom teaches outdoor education for a living. In July, they set out on what was supposed to be a peaceful 10-day paddling trip through Quetico, right across the border from the Boundary Waters. A ranger even told them on the way in that campfires were still allowed. 2 nights in, the smoke started drifting closer than either of them expected. By the 3rd day, Tom was cleaning fish when he looked up and saw flame roughly 1.5 miles away. He described it to NPR News as a huge crown fire. They triggered the SOS button on their satellite device right away. But the smoke was so thick that rescue aircraft couldn't fly. So they waited in the dark, inside their tent, hoping the fire would hold off until morning. It didn't fully hold off. Around 2 in the morning, Tom woke his brother and told him to pack everything now. By sunrise, they were surrounded on 3 sides with only one direction left open, east, toward open water. They paddled straight into it. What they found on the other side they later called a war zone, down trees still smoking, their hands blackened with soot. At one point, a tree Tom estimated at around 50 feet came down across the trail they just walked. They kept moving anyway because standing still had stopped being the safer option. Tom, the same man who teaches his own students to stay put and wait for rescue, said the opposite rule applied that night. When it's time to go, you just go. They made it out. Both of them. That's what a fuel moisture code of 95 actually looks like from inside it. Zoom out and this isn't one unlucky season. It's 4 slow-moving trends all landing on the same year. The country is now 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than it was in 1970, roughly 1.5 degrees Celsius. And that warming is exactly what feeds the vacuum in the first place. Fire seasons now run close to 2 months longer than they did back then, which means there's almost no calm stretch left for the ground to recover. For most of the last century, this country fought every fire it could find, truth be told, which sounds responsible until you realize it let 100 years of dead wood and brush pile up in forests that used to burn it off naturally every decade or so. Tree density in parts of the Sierra Nevada went from around 100 stems per hectare to over 500. And for real, nearly 49 million American homes now sit inside what's officially classified as the highest risk zone for exactly this kind of fire. Up nearly half since 1990. Even the money's getting squeezed. Fighting these fires now eats over half the Forest Service's entire budget, which leaves less for the prevention work that would have shrunk next year's fire before it started. So go back to where we started. Level 5. The highest the alert system goes. That number is still standing as this posts. The lid is still parked overhead. The vacuum is still running, pulling water out of a landscape that's already given up almost everything it had left to give. Watch for that smoke lid to break, because when it does, this doesn't quiet down. It speeds up. Watch the alert level. Watch the air quality numbers in the cities we named. Watch whether El Nino keeps strengthening through the rest of the year, because that's the pattern deciding whether this stretches all the way into October. None of it turns off because the calendar changes. Bottom line, it turns off when the water actually comes back. Tom Connolly put it about as simply as anyone could, after he and his brother made it out of a wilderness that very nearly didn't let them. He said it plainly. We made it. We're here. That's where this stands right now. A vacuum running on a landscape with nothing left to spare, and millions of people standing closer to it than they realize. We started this video with one question. Why are these fires spreading so aggressively, and why is smoke reaching people hundreds or even thousands of miles away from the flames? Now you know the answer. The heat, the dry fuel, the atmosphere's thirst, the weather patterns, and the warning signals firefighters are watching are all connected. But before you leave, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from, and what are you seeing outside your window right now? Is the smoke affecting your community, your health, or your daily life? Tell me in the comments, because these numbers are not just statistics on a map. They are affecting real people in real places. We will keep tracking the alert levels, the air quality numbers, the smoke movement, and the signals scientists are watching next. Subscribe so you do not miss the next update. And if you believe more people need to understand that wildfire danger is no longer limited to the places where the flames are burning, tap the like button. It helps this reach the people who need this information before the next shift happens. We'll keep tracking every signal on that list, and we'll tell you exactly when it changes.